Hi everyone, what I'm going to do in this video is try and demonstrate to you just how our media in the UK going about spreading their propaganda amongst the masses, or as I like to call it, their fake news. Now to do this, you're going to have to use a little bit of imagination, and you're going to have to imagine that I come from a country, let's say a country that currently the US, with the UK hanging on its coattails, are trying to effect a regime change war in. So let's say I'm from Venezuela. Now, I'm not just from Venezuela, I'm also somebody who's known by three names from Venezuela, and I'm a Venezuelan activist who was facing a fourth jail term in Venezuela, so I fled to the UK and settled in the Midlands, which is, you don't have to use your imagination for that, because that's where I am. But I'm Venezuelan, okay, and I've got three names. And I have been in prison in Venezuela 3 times, and I was facing a fourth term, so I came over here. Okay? That's the scenario. Now imagine that me, an anti-Maduro activist, then sets up his own organisation. An organisation with a very official sounding name. Let's call it the Venezuelan Telescope for Democratic Rights. That sounds really official, doesn't it? The Venezuelan Telescope for Democratic Rights. Since, you know, they're stomping all over democratic rights in Venezuela, according to our media, aren't they? So I'm alone in this organisation. I'm the only one who's responsible for it. Now imagine that the Venezuelan Telescope for Democratic Rights starts getting funding from various sources, the EU, etc., but also chief among which the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office, okay, to the tune of, I don't know, nearly £200,000 for what the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office will call equipment, okay? Then, for the Venezuelan Telescope for Democratic Rights, I start getting phone calls from hundreds of people in Venezuela, some of which I say are risking their life for me to give me this information, highlighting any democratic or violations of democratic rights that are happening in my home country. Now imagine that once I start doing this, the BBC and media entire in the United Kingdom, that's the Independent, that's the Guardian, that's the Telegraph, you know, it's basically like 90% of the media that people read in this country and hear, they all, to a man, quote me. And they don't quote me as my name or anything like that. They just call me the Venezuelan Telescope for Democratic Rights. Okay? So they will say the Venezuelan Telescope for Democratic Rights has reported an increase in violations of democracy here, and here in Venezuela in the last week. Thank you very much. See you again. And it goes on and on and on. And this happens on and on for years, over and over for years. What would you think? If this happened, you'd probably, you know, call bullshit on me and my reporting and anybody who was reporting my reporting, wouldn't you? I mean, how can you trust me as a reliable source? I am obviously somebody with my own agenda, being funded by other people with their own agenda. There's no way you could trust me as a reliable source, is there? And there's no way the media could quote me as a reliable source. What if I also refused to share my data with anybody, or the methodology of how I collected that data on Venezuelan violations of democracy? Now, what would you think of the media if they only referred to me as the Venezuelan Telescope for Democratic Violations, or the Venezuelan Telescope for Democratic Rights? A very official sounding name, and not as, I don't know, some Venezuelan ex-con who is saying stuff and speaks to people in Venezuela, and by the way, he lives in Wolverhampton. You would think that them doing that and quoting me as fact and giving me this important sounding name would be a dereliction of duty to the Fourth Estate, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you think that our trusted media were guilty of facilitating and spreading fake news? What if I, as president of the Venezuelan Telescope for Democratic Violations, what if I put on my website, Venezuelan Telescope for Democratic Violations.org, or whatever it's called, the VTVR is not linked to any political body, even though I got £195,000 for equipment from the UK and funding from the EU, etc. You would call bullshit on that, wouldn't you? Now, would you think I was being entirely truthful? Or would you think that I was lying my ass off to you and everybody else as some part of an elaborate scheme to construct a narrative, propagandize the public? Now, I'm assuming that nobody watching this right now would accept what I have just described as an acceptable standard of journalism. I'm assuming you're unanimous in your objections to this Orwellian scenario being okay. Well, here's the thing. As ridiculous as this scenario sounds, it's basically what's been going on under your very noses for years. This is what the media do. Regular viewers of mine will know where I'm going with this. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. Yes, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights is one man. He's just one man. He's about 30 miles from me in Coventry. It's not difficult. It really is not difficult to find this stuff out. I mean, this is the Wikipedia page, and I've just highlighted some stuff there. It's a bit small, so I've enlarged it for you. Look at this. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights is a United Kingdom-based information office. Based in the United Kingdom. It is frequently quoted by major news outlets since the beginning of the war about violations of human rights in Syria. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights is run by Rami Abdul Rahman, sometimes referred to as Rami Abdul Rahman, from his home in Coventry. Abdul Rahman is a Syrian Sunni who owns a clothing shop. Born Osama Suleiman, he adopted a pseudonym during his years of activism in Syria and has used it publicly ever since. After being imprisoned 3 times in Syria, Abdul Rahman fled to the United Kingdom, fearing a 4th jail term, and has not returned. I'm not kidding. He really is the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. This is how Orwellian our media is at constructing their fake news. It continues. Media Lens, it says there, the great Media Lens, do some good work. Media Lens said that journalist Ian Sinclair confirmed, quote, in communication with the Foreign Office that, quote, the UK funded a project worth £194,769.60 to provide the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, one geezer from Coventry, with communications equipment and cameras. The organisation says on its website the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights is not associated or linked to any political body. The BBC were called out on this. And by the way, it says there, Syrian Observatory for Human Rights has been described as being pro-opposition or anti-Assad and has been criticised for refusing to share its data or methodology. It is basically the ridiculous scenario that I explained with me being from Venezuela, fleeing over here, escaping a 4th jail term, and then calling myself the Venezuelan Telescope for Democratic Violations, and getting phone calls from Venezuela saying, yeah, there's been a violation here and here, and then telling the BBC, and that is an Orwellian nightmare. Now, when the BBC were called out on this, they didn't stop using the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights as a source. They didn't stop using it. People were saying it's just a geezer in Coventry. So what they started doing, I'm not kidding you, I saw it happen in real time. They started using the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, based in Coventry, said XYZ. That's all they did. They didn't say this geezer's obviously not a trusted source. They carried on quoting him and just put the caveat, he's in Coventry, and think that that was good enough to mask their obvious fake news. That is unacceptable. Don't you agree? I said in my last video that the reason I do this is I believe our media is fake news. What I believe I just showed you is the blueprint of how they create it. I'm going to spend as much time as possible explaining how they do it and where they are doing it to you, so you know the truth. You're not getting it from them. You're getting it from people like me doing this on less than £1,000 a month from his council flat. The BBC have 35,000 employees. I do the news better than them. Who'd have thunk it? Thanks very much for watching. Please make sure you're subscribed and click the bell below for a notification of when I drop further videos. And click through to the website as well, find out ways you can support me. I can't do this without your support. And I'm sure you will agree after seeing this video. We really do need a dose of truth, don't you think? Thanks very much, everyone. Peace and take care.